Hi, it's Katrina. Egypt's Lost Hall of Records. While a Hall of Records might sound quite boring, there is a rumor that there is an ancient lost Hall of Records from ancient Egypt, similar to the Library of Alexandria, containing all the secrets and knowledge of the ancient world. Famous clairvoyant Edgar Cayce went into a trance and declared that the refugees from the lost city of Atlantis had buried their secrets in a Hall of Records under the Sphinx. Although he died in 1945, he wrote many books and started a holistic and paranormal research foundation. People inspired by Cayce's predictions went to Egypt to learn more about the pyramids and the Sphinx and tried to find these invaluable historical documents. Most scholars reject this belief, arguing that there is no actual evidence of such a place existing. In 1998, Director of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, Zahi Hawass, led excavations at the site, and the team reportedly discovered several natural caves containing no artifacts. But this did not stop people from believing that the Hall of Records is real. To this day, believers in ancient aliens accuse the Egyptian government and mainstream experts of blocking further investigations. They believe that authorities' denial of access to the site implies that they are keeping secrets about what's really there. The Sphinx has always gotten everyone's attention with its aura of magic and mysticism, and the strange, mysterious holes found throughout the structure make people wonder, what is the Sphinx hiding? There is one rumor that the Hall of Records was sealed off by a pre-Egyptian society way back in 10,500 BC, because that's the last time that the Leo constellation lined up with the area between the Sphinx's paws. How would anyone know that? I'm not sure. However, ground-penetrating radar has revealed empty spaces and abnormalities in the ground below the Sphinx. And while some say it is just caves, it is hard to believe the ancient Egyptians wouldn't take advantage of that space and use it for something sacred. Those who believe in the Hall of Records think that uncovering it would expose a wealth of information about ancient Egypt and world history, perhaps even what happened to Atlantis. They also assert that the documents within may not have been left by the ancient Egyptians, but perhaps by an advanced prehistoric society that we do not even know about. ARA Farasa. Archaeologists in Spain recently hit the jackpot when they found the remains of a wooden safe in a Roman villa. Known as an arca ferrata, it is an actual ark, like the Ark of the Covenant. Rich people in Roman times would use them to keep their valuables safe, just like you would today. These types of chests were typically used for storing clothes, jewelry, money, important documents, and other objects of monetary and sentimental value. To prevent the boxes from being stolen, families nailed them to the walls of their homes. This arca ferrata is a large, four-legged wooden chest covered in gold, bronze, and iron, measuring 3.1 by 2.9 feet, and it's adorned with many ancient symbols, including laurel branches, a horn of plenty, a Roman dish called a patera, a Greek sun hat called a petasso, and of course Greek and Roman deities, including Cupid, Apollo, and Mercury. The discovery of this box came as quite the surprise because there are not many artifacts like this preserved from the Roman Empire, with just only 4 others found in Spain and most of the rest in Pompeii. The ark was excavated from the ruins of a luxurious villa. It appears as though the villa caught fire, forcing its occupants to flee. Sadly, part of the house collapsed onto the box, and it was found in pretty bad shape. However, archaeologists are pretty confident they can restore it and are slowly working little by little to bring it back to its former glory. The Sword in the Stone. King Arthur and the Sword in the Stone is one of the oldest and most famous legends from ancient times. According to many versions of the story, the sword could only be pulled out of the stone by he who was the true king of England. And while the sword Excalibur, the very one that King Arthur himself pulled from the stone, has never been discovered, but an Italian version has. This is the sword of San Galgano, who lived back in the 12th century. He was born in 1148, became a wealthy noble, and later on trained as a knight. Near the end of his life, he went on to become a hermit. His conversion from knight to hermit happened after he had a vision of the archangel Michael. Michael appeared before San Galgano and urged him to renounce all of his worldly pleasures and become a hermit. So he did as he was told. His family and friends ridiculed him mercilessly for moving into a cave, but San Galgano didn't care. He even climbed to the top of Monte Siepi and thrust his sword into a stone as he renounced all his worldly desires. For the rest of his life, San Galgano lived alone as a hermit living in his faith. After he died in 1182, a circular church was constructed around the sword that was thrust into the stone. For some, it is this sword that went on to become the basis for the story of Arthur and his sword in the stone. But here's the weird part. The sword of San Galgano is 100% real. The sword has been in the stone ever since the 12th century, for over 800 years. Even though many thought the sword was fake for years, the metal and the style of the sword have all been dated, and it is officially recognized as an authentic ancient relic. But to this day, nobody knows how San Galgano got the thing into the stone, or how much of his legend is true. In the 12th century, around the same time the church was built around the real sword in the stone, poet Robert de Boron added a story to the legend of King Arthur that talked about a sword anchored in an anvil, and then over the years and the many translations, it was changed to a stone. Was it a different legend, or was this Italian one the inspiration? Most likely we'll never know. 1,200-year-old Bible. Recently, Turkish police arrested 6 people who got caught trying to sell what authorities believed was a stolen ancient Bible. Suspected to be members of a smuggling ring, the individuals were seen trying to sell the 1,200-year-old artifact in southern Turkey's Diyarbakir province. It is decorated with gold leaf and has a large star and cross motif on the cover. Made from leather pages adorned with gold motifs, the 34-page Bible fits the profile for an item that may have illegally traveled from war-torn Syria to Turkey, which has become a hotbed for looted Syrian and Iraqi artifacts. Somebody saw them and called the police, who were actually able to catch the thieves red-handed. The suspects were apprehended amid heightened efforts to try to stop the illegal sale of ancient artifacts. Bibles are actually a common item of interest on the antiquities black market in Turkey. Acting on a tip last year, Turkish investigators in southeastern Anatolia seized a Hebrew Bible that was stolen from a museum in Aleppo. Made from gazelle skin, the ancient text reportedly dates back to the time of the Virgin Mary and is worth around $1 million. In 2018, anti-smuggling authorities recovered 6 Hebrew Bibles in the western city of Usak after 2 suspects' vehicles were seen traveling close to the Syrian border. While law enforcement often refrains from identifying suspects and is quiet about their legal proceedings, the number of arrests in recent years reflects the vast amount of resources and dedication Turkey's government is pouring into combating the opportunistic criminals who are profiting from the ravages of war in the Middle East. The Emerald Dial. In 1912, a group of workers in London made an extremely valuable discovery. They were demolishing an old building near St. Paul's Cathedral in Cheapside and got down to the cellar where they began hacking away at the bricks. Something glimmered and caught their attention. Turns out it was a wooden box chock full of treasure. There was jewelry, gems, and many other precious objects. It is now known as the Cheapside Horde, and it is the largest known collection of Elizabethan and Stuart-era jewelry ever found. Consisting of nearly 500 pieces, experts believe the cache was hidden around 350 years ago, and more recent in-depth studies have dated it to sometime between 1640 and 1666. The story goes that a gem dealer booked passage from the Orient back to England, bringing with him boxes and boxes full of gems. Someone saw him with a diamond the size of a walnut hanging around his neck, and then the next thing you know, he was poisoned. His treasure disappeared, but some of it ended up in the Cheapside Horde. A curator at the Museum of London said that a jeweler or a goldsmith may have gathered the collection of jewels from all over and stashed the items before heading off to battle. Nobody knows who this person was, however. While it was relatively common for people to bury their valuables during that time, eventually they came back to get them. Upon debuting the collection's exhibit in 2013, the Museum of London described it as the single most important source of our knowledge on early modern jewelry worldwide. The items consist of jewelry made from materials sourced from different continents, including Colombian emeralds, diamonds from India, and pearls from Bahrain. Included among the treasures are an emerald watch, a gilt brass watch, a Byzantine-era sapphire and pearl pendant, a gold pendant with sapphires, and much more. The emerald watch alone is considered priceless. Cut from an enormous emerald stone, the craftsmanship is incredible. Emeralds are delicate stones and fracture easily. Cutting into it and making a lid and engraving a clock right into it is incredible. But nobody knows who these incredible jewelers were, or the story behind who hid this incredible treasure. If only the pieces could speak. Yamashitas Gold. There are rumors that a Japanese World War II general tried to hide a stash of gold in the Philippines. Ever since the war ended, treasure hunters have been searching for the legendary treasure said to be hidden near a remote village. American historian Sterling Seagrave believes that the Imperial Japanese forces committed large-scale looting during World War II, taking billions of dollars worth of stolen goods with help from the Yakuza gang and elite members of society. They supposedly stashed the treasure in caves, tunnels, and underground sites throughout the Philippines. Now known as Yamashitas Gold, the alleged hoard is named after the Japanese general Tomoyuki Yamashita, who reportedly masterminded the theft. Temptation to strike it big has attracted treasure hunters for over 50 years. Many experts reject the tale of the fabled gold and believe that people are wasting their time and money searching for something that simply doesn't exist. Meanwhile, local residents of a hillside village on the island of Panay have petitioned the government to stop allowing excavations, which are threatening to cause a deadly landslide that could bury several homes. In a desperate plea to officials last year, villagers accused scavengers of jeopardizing their safety. The treasure hunters stubbornly claimed that authorities permitted the search and said they had no plans to stop. A few months later, a group discovered a crumbling tunnel at one of the suspected treasure sites. Carved into a mountain, the labyrinth was too unstable to enter, so the team sent in a robot. It captured images of what appeared to be hand-chiseled walls, posts with numbers on them, and an old military-issued knife, possibly dating back to World War II. What do you think? Are fortune seekers endangering people's lives for nothing? Or might there be some truth to the legend? Lost Monastery. Historical records mention the presence of an Anglo-Saxon monastery in Berkshire, England that was run by a powerful Mercian queen. But until recently, nobody knew where it was. Historians knew Queen Swynethryth became this monastery's abbess after her husband, King Offa, died in 796 AD. As the wife of the man who ruled over the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Mercia, she was one of the most powerful women of her time. The site was part of a larger network of monasteries along the Thames, which prospered at a time when the river was part of an important trade route. Archaeologists from the University of Reading finally discovered and excavated the monastery last summer, 2021. They located it on a gravel island that serves as the grounds of the Holy Trinity Church in the village of Cookham. At the site, the team found the remains of wooden buildings that once housed those who lived at the monastery. Another part of the site appears to have been used for metalworking. The team also discovered some of the former residents' personal belongings, including pottery, cooking vessels, clothing, and jewelry. Experts know very little about what life was like at the monastery, making the breakthrough discovery especially important. They plan to study the artifacts found at the site in hopes of gaining some insight into the daily lives of the people who lived here, and especially the life of one of the most powerful women of the early Middle Ages. The next step is trying to locate her final resting place. The Scof Nung. The Scof Nung stems from ancient Norse beliefs. It's an old and very powerful sword imbued with supernatural powers. If legends are to be believed, it belonged to the Danish king Hrolf Kraki, one of the most heroic kings from Scandinavia. The Scof Nung is considered to be the most powerful sword anywhere in the northern lands. It had powers such as supernatural sharpness, incredible hardness, and it also happened to contain the spirits of 12 of the most battle-hardened berserkers ever. One of the biggest issues surrounding this legendary artifact is that nobody knows if King Hrolf Kraki ever existed at all. He may have just been a character who appeared in the story of Beowulf. But then again, he may have been a real Danish king. Nobody has any idea. All we know is that the legend of the sword goes back to at least the 13th century. It supposedly inflicts wounds which are unable to be healed. On the flip side, it heals all wounds inflicted upon the wielder of the sword, thanks to a magical healing stone. Unfortunately, most of us are pretty aware that healing stones and magical powers don't really exist. The sword itself may have been wielded by a powerful Danish king. It may have been a totally real artifact, but chances are it didn't have any magical powers. It was just the king might have been a master at wielding it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Man in the Iron Mask. The mysterious unidentified 17th century prisoner known simply as the Man in the Iron Mask has gone down in history with no name. All we know is that he was arrested in 1669 and spent upwards of 30 years in various French prisons. The prisoner wore a black velvet mask the entire time, right up until his death in 1703, leaving his identity a mystery to this day. Ever since, people have been trying to figure out who the man was. Scholars have debunked the claims of writer Alexandre Dumas and the renowned philosopher Voltaire, who alleged that the prisoner was the twin brother of Louis XIV, also known as Louis the Great. Most modern experts believe that the man's name was Eustache d'Auger, according to historian Paul Sonino, who claims that the captive was a valet for someone important. As a valet, you would have had a very close relationship with whoever he served, and may have overheard important secrets. This would explain why he was kept under such tight security for so long. Sonino thoroughly studied records and concluded that d'Auger worked for the treasurer of a wealthy and high-ranking church official named Cardinal Mazarin. Evidence indicates that Mazarin may have accumulated some of his fortune by swindling English royalty. The historian theorized that Cardinal Mazarin's treasurer caught on to the dirty deed, d'Auger in turn found out about it, and then he mentioned it to the wrong person. Perhaps his punishment came in the form of lifelong imprisonment, along with threats of execution if he ever dared to expose his identity. While we may not ever know what the Man in the Iron Mask looked like, we at least know who he probably was, and what he might have been locked up for. Embracing lovers. While excavating an ancient cemetery in northern China's Shaanxi province last year, archaeologists discovered the well-preserved skeletons of two lovers embracing. The pair was found lying on their sides with their arms wrapped around one another and the woman's face buried into the man's shoulder. It's the first time a couple has been found buried like this in ancient China. According to a recently published report, the couple most likely lived during the Northern Wei dynasty that occupied much of the country's northern and central regions and lasted from 386 to 534 AD. Based on signs of trauma on the male skeleton, the paper speculates that the man passed away first, and that the woman may have committed suicide so she could be laid to rest with him. It's also possible that they died together in some sort of conflict or from an illness. People living under the Northern Wei dynasty increasingly valued the concept of an afterlife as Buddhism became more popular, according to study co-author Chun Zhang. This could explain why the couple was positioned the way they were, since ideals about love were constantly changing, and perhaps this couple believed they were going to be together in the afterlife. Researchers were intrigued to find a simple metal ring on the woman's left hand. While experts typically hesitate to associate discoveries like this with love and marriage, the overall context of the grave suggests that perhaps the jewelry symbolized the pair's commitment to each other. Material displays of love are rarely found in ancient burials, making the discovery of the intertwined lovers especially surprising. The Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is, one might say, the Holy Grail of legendary artifacts. It's one of the most sacred objects that may or may not exist, spoken of in legends for 2,000 years, and hunted by just about everyone with a thirst for treasure. But do you know what the Holy Grail really is? It's supposed to be the cup or goblet that Jesus drank out of during the Last Supper. It was also used to collect his blood as he was being crucified. But much like everything having to do with Jesus Christ, its existence is a mystery. Most people believe it's an object from myth, meant to be a metaphor, while some others believe it's a legitimate artifact that's right here on Earth. If the Holy Grail does exist, it has quite a history. Some scholars believe the Knights Templar discovered the Holy Grail at a temple in the city of Jerusalem, and then stole it and hid it somewhere so secret that nobody has ever found it again. Some say the Holy Grail is hiding in the Montserrat Abbey near Barcelona in Spain, while others claim it's at the Chapel of the Chalice in Valencia. The truth is that nobody actually knows where it is, though there are plenty of theories. It could exist. It could even be sitting in somebody's cupboard as we speak, being used for someone's evening wine. Taj Mahal Basement. The Taj Mahal was built in 1632 for Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan's favorite wife, Mumtaz Mahal. Situated on a 42-acre complex in the modern-day city of Agra in India, the breathtaking monument is the couple's final resting place. Their tombs are locked in a sealed chamber in the building's basement and are generally off-limits to visitors. Directly above on the first floor, there are 2 replica burials on public display. On Shah Jahan's birthday in 2018, visitors received an extremely rare opportunity to see the authentic tombs firsthand. Sadly, they found the graves in a deplorable state, blackened from years of neglect, and so they called on the government to restore them and to grant regular public access. By allowing visitors regularly, authorities would be held to higher standards of accountability when it comes to maintaining the tombs. But officials maintained their typical cryptic demeanor, and the tombs remained closed. This type of response is one of several suspicious things people have pointed out about the Taj Mahal. There is also speculation that the structure was built on the site of a former Hindu temple, and that the basement contains Hindu artifacts and artwork. In 2019, a parliament member claimed that these objects had been removed from the Taj Mahal in 2011, and that he had documentation proving that it was built on stolen Hindu property. There is also the mystery of locked doors hidden underground, and nobody knows what's behind them. It's believed that there may be as many as 22 secret rooms beneath the Taj Mahal. If they do exist, only a privileged few know what's inside them. But even so, the mystery remains as to who built the rooms in the first place. Bronze Age treasure. A farmer in Poland recently uncovered some ancient treasure in his field. He found an entire collection of some mysterious ancient objects while removing some rocks. So he stopped his work and contacted local experts who came and excavated the site. The artifacts include bronze daggers, an axe, a chisel, a hatchet, and several ornamented staffs called scepters. It turns out that they belong to the enigmatic Unetice culture of Central Europe. This culture was around from roughly 2300 to 1800 BC, near the beginning of the region's Bronze Age. Around 1,400 archaeological sites from various subgroups have been found in the Czech Republic, Poland, Germany, Austria, and Ukraine. Researchers said it's extremely rare to find any artifacts from these ancient people, let alone a whole collection of them together. These Bronze Age people may have hidden this collection of artifacts during times of war, and someone was hoping to come back for it later. This was not the only recent surprising archaeological discovery in the region either. Earlier this year, nearby residents found a bronze bracelet and notified local authorities. Archaeologists traveled to the site and unearthed hundreds of items, including bronze ornaments, jewelry, parts of a horse harness, and a broken vessel. The variety and amount of objects made the find especially valuable. These artifacts were traced to the Lusatian culture, which existed from 1300 BC to 500 BC during the Late Bronze and Early Iron Ages. Who knows what other treasures from little-known cultures might be popping up soon? The Sword of Charlemagne. Charlemagne is arguably the most important emperor in French history. He is also one of the most important figures in the history of Europe. He was the king of the Franks, which today we call the French. Charlemagne was born in 742. He ascended the throne as the sole ruler in 771 and went on to defeat many of the pagan groups still living in Europe, especially in Germany. He was declared by the Pope to be the first champion of the Catholic Church. Over 20 long years, he fought the Moors in Spain, the Saxons in Germany, and anyone else who got in his way. By the time he finally died in 814, just before he turned 72, he had left behind a legacy and dramatically changed Europe for the next 1,000 years to come. And he left some pretty cool artifacts behind. There are 2 swords that can be attributed to the Emperor Charlemagne. One is a saber currently kept in the Imperial Treasury in Vienna, Austria. The second is a sword being kept in the Louvre Museum in Paris. The sword in the Louvre is known as the Sword of Charlemagne, previously kept in a monastery by monks who believe the sword belonged to the great emperor. However, we don't know if this really is the most famous legendary sword in Europe. Some say it's too unlikely that Charlemagne's original sword survived in almost perfect condition for 1,200 years. These people claim the sword was crafted no earlier than 1150, meaning Charlemagne never touched it. The sword was never believed to have special powers, it just so happened to have belonged to the greatest French emperor ever. This makes it one of the most important European relics, but unfortunately, it might not even have been hid. King Solomon's treasure. According to the Hebrew Bible, Solomon was Israel's 3rd king. He reigned from 965 BC to 925 BC and was known for his immense wealth. The empire prospered under his leadership, during which time Solomon commissioned magnificent palaces and fortresses. He also reportedly had a huge collection of treasure, including the famed Ark of the Covenant, a gilded box that was supposedly built nearly 3,000 years ago, musical instruments made from gold, precious stones with religious significance, the tabernacle, and ornaments from the Garden of Eden. Throughout history, many people have searched for these items, which disappeared when the Babylonians sacked Solomon's temple in 597 and 586 BC, but experts and civilians alike have failed to find any of it. A legendary story written during biblical times, called the Treatise of the Vessels, describes how Solomon's treasures were stashed in hiding places throughout the Middle East. The Ark was said to have been taken and hidden by the Knights Templar and may have ended up any number of places, if it was ever real in the first place. Archaeologists admittedly do not know whether the treasure was hidden, stolen, or destroyed. Determining its fate and actually finding it are extremely difficult when faced with untangling the Treatise of the Vessels and the many other stories about the Ark of the Covenant and Solomon's other relics. For now, the search continues for the legendary riches. Ancient coin hoard. When one family decided to go camping at Habonim Beach in northern Israel recently, they probably didn't expect to stumble upon any archaeological artifacts. To their surprise, they found a 13-pound mass of ancient coins that had become stuck together after sitting in the water for centuries. Yotam Dahan, who discovered the coins, posted photos of the fascinating find on social media. The post caught the attention of staff members from the Israel Antiquities Authority, who contacted Dahan and asked him to lead them to the exact site where he found the coins. Luckily, he was able to, and an expert dated the clumped currency to the 4th century. Yaakov Sharvit, who heads the IAA's Marine Archaeology Department, told the Jerusalem Post that the coins may have come from an ancient ship that was sailing in the Mediterranean. He further explained that it was sadly common for vessels and their cargo to wash ashore, and that there are many archaeological sites along the beach. Whoever lost their huge coin stash was probably not very happy about it, and maybe got in big trouble. Dahan turned the coins over and received a certificate of appreciation in return. Bloodthirsty swords. The cursed Muramasa blades have a thirst for blood, and I'm not talking about one weapon here, but rather all the blades ever crafted by a man named Muramasa Sengo. As far as the Japanese myth goes, Muramasa was a famous swordsmith back during the days of feudal Japan, living in the 14th century. He built a school dedicated to sword forging and crafted the best swords anywhere in the country, often selling them to important generals and warriors. However, legend says that he attached a dark curse to many of his weapons. The curse has a lot to do with Muramasa himself, as he was apparently insane and prone to violent fits of rage. His unstable personality is said to have leaked into the weapons that he crafted. This caused those who wielded his swords to become enveloped by bloodlust, insanity, and violent rage. There are stories of sword wielders killing their families, cutting down their allies, and even going into uncontrollable fits of anger, in which they slash apart every single person near them. And it's all because of the Muramasa curse. Where history is concerned, Muramasa Sengo was a very real person. He really did make swords in the 14th century, and some of those swords are still around today, still allegedly cursed. Crystal skulls. Legend claims that an ancient Mesoamerican civilization, possibly the Maya, possessed 13 crystal skulls with supernatural powers. They were supposedly created somewhere in Central America between 15,000 and 10,000 years ago. Today, the skulls are rumored to be scattered throughout different collections. They allegedly vary in size and shade, with some being clear while others are smoky or colored. The artifacts supposedly range from being human-sized and intricately detailed to smaller and less detailed. Many believe that these obscure objects have healing properties and enhance the psychic abilities of the people around them. There are varying theories about the crystal skulls. Some people believe that ancient aliens or the residents of the mythical lost island of Atlantis made the skulls. Pseudoscience author Joshua Shapiro believes that the skulls are ancient computers that detect and record nearby energy and vibrations. He co-authored a book on the topic, in which he claims that these skulls contain a history of the world, and that they pictorially replay all the images of people and things they've come into contact with. Where did he get this information? I mean, that would be really cool if it were true. Most mainstream experts doubt these claims, which is kind of understandable given their fantastical nature, And why would the Atlanteans give crystal skulls to the Maya? Using electron microscopes, scientists from the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institution analyzed some of the skulls. They found markings made with modern tools and determined that the items were probably manufactured in Germany sometime during the mid to late 19th century. In other words, it's highly unlikely that any of the far-flung stories surrounding the skulls are true. Graves in Poland. As Germany faced imminent defeat in 1945 toward the end of World War II, Nazis scrambled to hide evidence of their war crimes. Hundreds of prisoners were marched into the woods of northern Poland and shot to death at close range. Their remains were buried in shallow mass graves. There were a few witnesses of these killings and another massacre that had occurred several years earlier in 1939. But while the locals knew this tragedy had occurred, no one really knew where this had happened, and a lot of people kept quiet. Finally, excavations near a small village yielded physical evidence of the atrocities. In addition to finding human bones, archaeologists unearthed jewelry, cigarette lighters, bullet casings, and more. Many things like this occurred in the forest, but these sites are rarely studied out of respect for Jewish beliefs that prohibit disturbing human remains. The creepy discoveries were made in an area nicknamed Death Valley, where Nazis murdered hundreds of priests, intellectuals, disabled people, and Jewish families. While people have long known about the horrific acts, the study yielded rare archaeological insight into this dark chapter in history. Personal effects found at the site have helped to identify many of the victims, but it's unlikely that every person will be identified due to the sheer number of remains. Experts are performing DNA tests in an effort to name more victims and bring closure to their surviving relatives. Pandora's Box. Most people have heard the expression, "Don't open Pandora's box." But have you ever wondered what Pandora's box really is? Is this a real artifact? Some great magical box that wreaked destruction on the ancient world? The truth is that the myth of Pandora has been around for thousands of years. The story is almost always told the same. In Greek mythology, Pandora was the first woman created by Zeus to punish the human race, after Prometheus stole fire from Mount Olympus. She was perfect, made out of clay and taught all kinds of charm and skills by the gods. When she was brought to life, she was engaged to Prometheus' brother and given a box, actually a jar, as a gift, but she could never open it. Of course, who can resist the call of a mystery box? She couldn't resist, as the gods knew what happened, and when she opened it, she accidentally unleashed evil upon the planet. Pandora's box contained all the horrors of the world: famine, disease, war, but as soon as she realized what she had done, she snapped the box shut, keeping hope inside. But just where was this girl's box? Well, there may not actually be a box. Some of the earliest versions of the Pandora myth have her opening a sealed pottery vase or a jar, something known as a pithos in ancient Greek. The actual translation would be something like Pandora's pottery vase, but obviously this doesn't really sound that appealing in the English language. Somewhere along the way, pottery vase was changed to box. The story is a metaphor demonstrating human weakness and explaining the cause for all the bad things in the world. Nobody has ever found evidence of a mythical box or a vase that unleashed evil, so it was probably never a real artifact. And if it is real, it's probably better that Pandora's box is never found at all, like Jumanji. Do you think Pandora's box could have been a real artifact in some form or another? Let me know in the comments below. Cleopatra's Lost Tomb. The Ptolemaic dynasty of ancient Egypt ended after Cleopatra VII's death in 30 BC. She and her lover Mark Antony committed suicide and were said to be buried together in a magnificent tomb. Filled with treasures made from gold, silver, emeralds, pearls, and ivory, the burial was located near a temple dedicated to the Egyptian god Isis, according to the 1st century writer Plutarch. The tomb's location remains a mystery to this day. Archaeologists have excavated numerous sites in hopes of finding it, but to no avail. One woman, Kathleen Martinez, has devoted the bulk of her career to searching for Cleopatra's final resting place. Her team has spent 14 years digging at a site outside Alexandria called Taposiris Magna, which Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities excavated in 2010 with no luck. Martinez believes that Cleopatra was determined not to let the conquering Roman Empire find out where the tomb would be, so she escaped as a prisoner and ended her life in a place where her own people would find her remains before her captors could. In the process, she evidently also outsmarted the modern-day experts, who have painstakingly searched for it, only to turn up empty-handed. Most researchers believe that the chances of finding Cleopatra's tomb are slim, despite Martinez's optimism. Last year, Live Science spoke with scholars who are experts on Cleopatra, and they were less than confident that her burial will ever be uncovered. They pointed out the possibility that the tomb is located in a part of Alexandria that is now submerged. It's also possible that the burial has been looted and plundered beyond recognition. Do you think Cleopatra's tomb will ever be found? Let me know in the comments below. White-haired skeleton at Pompeii. Archaeologists working at Pompeii recently discovered the exceptionally well-preserved skeleton of a wealthy former slave named Marcus Venerius Secundio. The remains are so intact, they contain the man's white hair, a portion of his ear, and clothing fragments. After being freed from slavery, Secundio became a priest and helped stage performances in Greek, according to an inscription found on his tomb. He achieved a high social standing and died at around 60 years old, several decades before Mount Vesuvius erupted and encased the ancient city in ash. In an official statement, Pompeii Archaeological Park Director Gabriel Zuchtriegel explained that the burial provides the first solid evidence of the Greek language being used alongside Latin. He further states that the findings reflect the city's lively and open cultural climate. Secundio's body remained in its remarkable state because his tomb was hermetically sealed. The burial is surprising because at the time, adults were usually cremated. Only small children were typically buried. Alongside the man's body, the team found 2 urns that were used for holding cremated human remains. One bears the inscription Novia Amabilis, which means kind wife. Experts are currently working to determine if Secundio's remains were deliberately preserved. They plan to analyze the fabric fragments for traces of embalming chemicals. In the meantime, park staff are considering the possibility of making the area the tomb was found in accessible to the public. The Sword of Roland. Durandal is the legendary Sword of Roland. Not much is known about Roland today, as he's not nearly as popular as the other figures like Robin Hood or King Arthur. In the old legends, Roland is said to be the nephew of Emperor Charlemagne, the man I told you about earlier. Roland had a prime position in Charlemagne's court as the greatest warrior in the 12 Peers, a group kind of like Charlemagne's personal bodyguards. The most famous story of Roland is the Battle of Roncesvalles, in which the European Christian forces faced off against the Muslims. Keep in mind that this battle actually happened, so there is a possibility that Roland was there in the flesh. The epic poem, The Song of Roland, explains that the sword Durandal was given to Charlemagne by an angel, and then passed down to Roland to use in his final stand. Other versions of the story claim the sword was that of the Trojan warrior Hector, given to Roland directly by a magician. But what made the sword so legendary was that it was adorned with sacred relics, some of which could be real. A tooth from St. Peter, the blood of St. Basile, hairs from St. Denis, and even a scrap of the robe worn by St. Mary. Thanks to all the artifacts, the sword had incredible holy power. Unfortunately, nobody knows how much of the story is true. The sword could exist, but we don't even know if Roland was a real person, or just a character in an old poem. When you go that far back, history and myth just blurs together. The Heretical Monk. Giordano Bruno was a 16th century Italian monk and philosopher from Naples, whose beliefs about the universe got him in some serious hot water with the Catholic Church that eventually led to his death. He studied all books he could get his hands on, even ones forbidden by the Church. He suggested the suns are stars that planets revolve around, which we know today is actually the truth. But back then, a statement like this challenged the claims of big-name thinkers like Copernicus and Kepler, who believed that our Earth and solar system was the center of the universe, and everything else revolved around us. Labeled a radical, Bruno fled Naples in 1576 to avoid the Inquisition. In an effort to stop the spread of the Protestant religion, the campaign sought to persecute people whose views disagreed with the Catholic Church, and Bruno certainly fell into that category. He spent several years in France, where he gained the favor of some influential people, and eventually moved to London, where he lived in the French ambassador's home. Although he had supporters, Bruno routinely encountered opposition. He returned to France, wore out his welcome there, moved to Germany, and then was invited to relocate to Venice. There, Bruno was arrested by the Inquisition, and he was imprisoned for the next 8 years. During that time, he was repeatedly questioned and tried for heresy, but refused to recant his beliefs. In 1600, Bruno was burned at the stake. Records of the event are missing, so nobody knows what the specific reasons were for putting him to death. It's also unclear whether his cosmological beliefs were the main motivating factor for giving him the death penalty, or if other religious offenses played a role. Rare fighting blade. While searching for a lost battlefield site in north-central Poland earlier this year, archaeologists unexpectedly discovered a rare Langsax long knife in nearly perfect condition. The blade was found in the Wadecki Landscape Park, where experts believe a battle may have occurred during the Polish-Pomeranian conflict of 1091 AD. But the knife likely had nothing to do with the skirmish. It appears to be a so-called loose find, according to an archaeologist who explained in a statement that there is no evidence that the artifact has a wider connection to its surroundings. He described the size of the blade as impressive, adding that it could easily measure up against double-edged swords from that period. So how did such a valuable ancient weapon end up here? Maybe someone dropped it? The weapon could date as far back as the 8th century, and it may be Norwegian, pointing toward possible Viking origins. The tip of the blade is slightly bent, but it otherwise contains no visible damage. The team plans to perform metallographic tests on the knife in hopes of learning more about it. The Seven-Branched Sword. The Seven-Branched Sword of Japan is a very unusual artifact. It's called the tachi in Japanese, and it was discovered back in 1945 at the Isanokami Shrine. This place is located in the Nara Prefecture, one of the oldest and most sacred parts of Japan. The Shinto shrine has a history going back 2,000 years and is home to the most important and most sacred relics in the country. The tachi sword is unusual in the way it looks, as it has 3 pairs of protrusions sticking out from either side. It wouldn't have been very useful in actual fighting, as there wasn't much edge to slash an enemy with. But that's okay, as experts say the sword was likely for ceremonial purposes. The big mystery is that nobody knows exactly what ceremonies the blade was used for. There was once an inscription on the blade inlaid with gold, claiming it had magical power and could fight off enemy forces. However, nobody knows who the sword belonged to or where it came from, making it one of the most legendary weapons in the world, whose legend itself has been lost. Fireproof shingles. Colonial Williamsburg once consisted of 89 original buildings, including the Powder Magazine, an octagonal building that was built in 1715. It was originally built for storing gunpowder and firearms, and later functioned as a stable and then a church. In 1930, the structure was restored as part of the site's Living History Museum. Researchers long believed that the Powder Magazine was originally equipped with flammable wooden shingles, but they recently learned otherwise. While excavating near the building, a team led by archaeologist Jack Gary found several small clay roof tiles. The discovery, which happened just weeks into a 3-month excavation project, highlights the fact that there's still a lot experts don't know about the former capital of Virginia. Speaking with the Virginia Gazette, Gary explained that the shingle warrants a major reinterpretation of the Powder Magazine. He hopes to find more fascinating artifacts throughout the remainder of the dig, which will help to paint a more accurate picture of the original building and any changes that need to be made to the restored version. Have any of you visited this site? Let me know in the comments below. Fragments of the cross. Archaeologists working at an ancient church in Turkey recently claimed to have found fragments of an artifact that could rock the religious world. This particular relic was found inside of a stone chest, taken from the ruins of a 7th century church. According to the lead archaeologist on the project, Gulgun Koroglu, the object in the chest is the holiest of holy artifacts, a piece of the cross upon which Jesus Christ was allegedly crucified. She says the fragment was carved with a small cross, and also that it's the most important artifact that she has ever uncovered. As you can imagine, Jesus' physical cross has been the object of great religious interest and global controversy. There are multiple churches around the globe that claim to possess a small fragment of the wooden cross, but none of these fragments have ever been properly authenticated. It's almost impossible to determine if the fragment really did belong to this particular cross, as there is no way to know and nothing to compare it to. Crucifixions during Roman times were quite common and have been going on for thousands of years. And so the mystery continues. Ancient body modification. People have been getting piercings and tattoos and practicing body modification for thousands of years. Gabon is a country located along the Atlantic coast of Central Africa. While excavating a cave filled with human remains, archaeologists found evidence that during ancient times, people practiced body modification techniques that were unique to the area. The team determined that the remains belonged to at least 28 people who lived during the 14th and 15th centuries. They were both male and female and varied in age. Their bodies were dropped or lowered into the cave along with valuable metal-grave goods like axes and jewelry, indicating that the deceased were of high social ranking. The adults' incisor teeth had been removed earlier in their lives, drastically altering the shape of their face. This may have been done to identify them as belonging to a certain group, or of a high status. While dental modification was common in ancient Africa, this particular practice has never been seen before. Reaching the site is no easy task. Because the cave is only accessible through a hole in the ceiling, the team had no choice but to rappel 82 feet to the bottom. They plan to return for further investigation and hope to obtain DNA from the remains. Copper Scroll Treasure. Discovered in a cave at the Qumran archaeological site on Israel's West Bank in 1952, the Copper Scroll is different from all of the other Dead Sea Scrolls. Not only is it made from copper, unlike the others, which were written on parchment, but it contains an extensive list of 64 places where literal tons of gold and silver treasures are buried or hidden. Their modern-day value would be astronomical, likely numbering in the trillions of dollars. But the list was written using cryptic language and does not provide precise locations, and nobody has ever found anything from the Horde. Dating back over 1,900 years, the scroll was created when the Roman Empire controlled the Qumran region. Researchers can't seem to agree on a precise date for when the treasures were hidden, but it's safe to say that it was during or around the same time the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. Many experts theorize that the stashing occurred before the sacking of the Second Temple in 70 AD. Meanwhile, some scholars believe that the list contains an unrealistic amount of gold and silver, too much for the treasures to possibly really exist. Sadly, this is one historical mystery that may never be solved, but will be kept alive by those who believe and who are determined to find the missing treasure, the size of humans. In a recent study, researchers measured and examined the body and brain size of 300 fossils from the Homo genus found in various places throughout the world. They analyzed the data in combination with a reconstruction of regional climates over the last million years, and came to some surprising conclusions. It looks like the climate and the weather really impacted the size of early people. The research encompassed various species, including Neanderthals, Homo habilis, and other extinct members of the human family tree. Generally speaking, however, the Homo genus has demonstrated a trend of developing larger bodies and brains over time. But the team found that early people evolved to have larger bodies in colder regions. It's thought that a bigger size protects against frigid temperatures because bigger bodies lose less heat. Study leader Andrea Manica attributes these changes directly to climate and temperature. He cited living evidence of this in the fact that people who are native to warm regions tend to be smaller than those who live in colder climates. Brain size, on the other hand, seems to have nothing to do with climate. The researchers found that ancient humans with larger brains tended to live in habitats that lacked vegetation but were ecologically stable. Manica believes that people who lived in places like grasslands and open steppes may have developed bigger brains as a result of hunting large animals for food, which was an arguably complex task that demanded ample brain energy. The researchers did say that you shouldn't worry too much about the study to see how our bodies might change in the future. There was other things to worry about. Sun Wukong's magic staff. The Ruyi Jingu Bang, better known as the Staff of Sun Wukong, is a magical weapon once wielded by the immortal monkey from Chinese legend. The weapon is described in myths as being a pillar of black iron at least 20 feet long, banded with gold on each end. The Chinese name for the staff translates to English a little strangely as the compliant golden hooped rod. The magical staff is handed over to Sun Wukong by a dragon queen living in the underwater kingdom of Aoguang, with it previously being used by Yu the Great to measure the depths of the water after the Great Flood that blanketed the earth. The story of Sun Wukong and his magic staff really is nothing but a story. There were no immortal monkeys running around in China during the 16th century. Plus, the magic staff is said to shrink or grow at the whim of its owner. It can also make copies of itself, and when Sun Wukong isn't using it, he shrinks it to the size of a needle and keeps it stashed behind his ear like a toothpick. But even though the monkey staff is one artifact that archaeologists are likely never to find, it does have a prominent place in popular culture in ways that a lot of people don't realize. For example, in the Dragon Ball franchise, Son Goku's staff is named Nayoi Bo, which translates from the Chinese Ruyi Bang. Goku himself is actually based on Sun Wukong, so it's no surprise that they also gave him the magic staff. Christopher Columbus letter. In 2003, an antiquities collector unsuspectingly bought a stolen copy of a letter that Christopher Columbus wrote in 1493, describing his journey to the New World. He wrote the letter to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. The letter was then published in cities and countries across Europe, helping spread the news of his journey throughout the continent. This letter had vanished decades earlier from the Biblioteca Nazionale Marciana, a public library in Venice, Italy. Someone probably stole it, then sold it. Bad luck for the buyer. Known as the Planck 1 edition, the letter is named after Stefan Planck, the Rome-based printer who translated it from Spanish into Latin and published 2 editions over 500 years ago. The Biblioteca Nazionale Marciana acquired a copy of the first edition in 1875 and had it until it disappeared sometime between 1985 and 1988, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. There are only around 30 known surviving copies of the first edition, putting its estimated value at around $1.3 million. Detectives finally traced the extremely rare letter's whereabouts in 2019 and contacted the owner, who cooperated with the investigation and willingly relinquished the artifact once it was deemed to be the stolen copy. After more than 40 years, the letter was finally returned to its rightful owner last year. This wasn't the first time one of these copies has gone missing either. A copy of the Planck 2 version of the same Columbus letter was returned to the National Library of Catalonia in Barcelona, Spain, just 2 years earlier in 2018, following a 7-year investigation by ICE. Acting on a tip that someone had stolen authentic texts from museums and replaced the originals with forgeries, investigators tracked down the genuine copy, which had recently sold for around $1 million. After verifying its authenticity, the letter was repatriated to Spain. Sakwala Chakraya, located in modern-day Sri Lanka, Anuradhapura, locally known as Rajarata or the Land of Kings, is an ancient sacred city and the island's first kingdom. Established in 377 BC, it remains a holy destination for Buddhist pilgrims from all over the world. Within Anuradhapura, at a 40-acre site called Ranmasu Uyana, or the Golden Fish Park, there is a 6-foot slab that is said to contain the formula for unlocking the secrets of the universe. Known as Sakwala Chakraya, which is Sinhalese for a universe cycle, and nicknamed the Stargate, the artifact contains a collection of symbols that are widely interpreted to be a cosmological chart of some sort. Facing the suspected space map, there is a series of 4 seats carved out of rock. Archaeologists and historians have failed to explain the seats or the Stargate in rational terms. Speaking with the BBC, University of Kelaniya archaeology professor Raj Somadeva said that the items could date back to the 7th century, when the site's second major developmental phase began, but that the chart's origins, meaning, and function are completely absent from historical records, which are otherwise meticulous and thorough. This society kept good notes, but mentions of the Stargate are nowhere to be found. Conspiracy theorists and armchair detectives have suggested that the Stargate is a portal between Earth and outer space, and that ancient people used it for communicating with aliens, or that aliens were traveling to Earth to mine gold. Some have also connected the markings on the chart with similar symbols found at the ancient Egyptian site of Abu Ghurab and the Gateway to the Gods in Peru. Stargates are everywhere. African funeral pole. Sometimes it's not the authorities who handle stolen artifact cases, but ordinary people who believe that cultural heritage items ended up in the wrong hands. In June 2020, 5 activists from the group Unity, Dignity and Courage, or UDC, filmed themselves removing a Bari funeral pole from the Kouai Branly Museum in Paris, claiming that the French had looted it from the modern-day African country of Chad. The group, which advocates for African freedom from all forms of domination, declared, "We are taking it home," as they marched toward the museum's exit. But their mission was short-lived, as security stopped them, arrested them, and promptly returned the staff to its display. Congolese activist Mwazulu Diabanza and his co-conspirators were charged with the attempted theft of a registered artwork, which carries a prison sentence of up to 10 years and fines of up to $176,000. This is just one of several court cases Diabanza found himself caught up in, stemming from protests where his group tried to recover artifacts from museums. He later argued that he did not intend to steal the funeral staff, but that the group meant to convey the injustice of pillaging in Africa and the French government's lack of efforts to return these items to their places of origin. Diabanza avoided prison and received a fine of up to $1,175 for aggravated theft. Meanwhile, controversies over the rightful ownership of artifacts taken from other countries, especially those seized during violent encounters and conquest, have gained traction in Europe in recent years, with activists increasingly advocating for the return of such items to their homelands. Herculan Mosaic. The stolen antiquities trade stemming from Syria is far-reaching, as detectives from the FBI and Homeland Security investigations discovered in 2018, when an investigation led them to a massive mosaic depicting the Roman god Hercules that they believed was smuggled all the way to California. Measuring 18 feet long and weighing around 1 ton, the 3rd or 4th century artwork was recovered from the Palmdale home of Muhammad Yassin al-Karihi, who was suspected of using false documents to import the mosaic. An expert verified that the mosaic is an authentic Byzantine-era piece, and that it matches similar pieces found in Syria, according to a statement from the U.S. Department of Justice. Al-Karihi reportedly admitted to filing papers undervaluing the shipment's worth at $2,200 and misrepresenting the mosaic's quality. In reality, he paid around $12,000 for the artwork, and its estimated value is much higher. The feds also accused al-Karihi of concealing the artifact at his residence. The 53-year-old was charged last year with 1 count of entry of goods into the United States falsely classified as to quality and value, and he is reportedly fighting to reclaim the mosaic. Who do you think will win? US government or Mr. A? Let me know in the comments below. Royston Cave. Beneath the town of Royston in Hertfordshire, England, is a man-made cave of unknown origins filled with enigmatic carvings. Measuring 17 feet in diameter and 26 feet high, its chamber is in the shape of a bell sunken into chalk limestone. It was likely once divided into 2 levels. The style of the medieval carvings covering the cave's walls has never been seen anywhere else in Britain, with the only known similar examples being in Israel and Czechoslovakia. This elaborate imagery, which is believed to date back to the 13th century, represents a series of biblical figures and scenarios, including the crucifixion of Christ and what appear to be depictions of Saint Catherine of Alexandria, Saint Lawrence, Saint Christopher, and others. Experts can't seem to agree on who built the cave or what it was used for. One popular theory suggests that it served as a secret meeting place for the Knights Templar, or as an early Freemason lodge. Another idea proposes that the cave was built as a private chapel for Lady Rosia, the wife of William the Conqueror's steward. There are less far-fetched theories, including that Augustinian monks used the structure as a storage facility. As things currently stand, your guess is as good as mine. So who do you think built Royston Cave, and why? Let me know in the comments below. Massive crime ring steals 10,000 artifacts. In one of the biggest stolen artifact busts in recent years, known as Operation Ake, 350 police officers across 5 countries and from numerous agencies seized around 10,000 cultural items stolen from the Calabria region in southern Italy. The large-scale investigation began in 2017 in an effort to combat widespread looting near the toe of the boot-shaped peninsula, with Italian authorities receiving help from France, Britain, Germany, and Serbia. Detectives uncovered a sophisticated operation being run by an organized crime group. They would wear masks and go to archaeological sites with excavators to dig everything up, and then comb through the area with sophisticated metal detectors. Then the items were trafficked abroad and sold at high-end auction houses. Law enforcement's first clue to the masked culprits' identities came when one of the criminals' license plates appeared on drone surveillance footage. Once all the clues added up sufficiently, investigators raided 80 homes and recovered hordes of valuable artifacts dating as far back as the 4th century BC, and of course worth millions of dollars. 2 suspected leaders of the crime ring were arrested and jailed. 21 others were put on house arrest. Authorities believe that the criminals robbed archaeological sites for years. Shockingly, the massive seizure barely puts a dent in the estimated 1 million artifacts that are still missing in Italy. In 2014 alone, officers recovered around 130,000 artifacts worth more than $500 million. Graffiti crosses. The walls of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem are covered in thousands of tiny crosses that, until recently, researchers believed were carved by medieval pilgrims, but they may have been misunderstood for years. A new study turned this theory upside down when it found that it was likely that just a handful of people, perhaps stonemasons or artists, covered the crosses for the pilgrims, and that the travelers kept the dust from the etching as a souvenir of the sacred site. Many of the crosses date back to the 14th and 15th centuries, several centuries after the Crusades, indicating that post-medieval pilgrims ventured to the site en masse. Study leader Amit Ram noticed during a visit to the church that the crosses seemed to be expertly carved, challenging the long-held notion that they were put there by thousands of different people. He also saw a visitor trying to etch a cross into the wall, but security and church staff rushed right over to stop the person, making him wonder who in their right mind would have permitted pilgrims to make their mark on the wall hundreds of years ago. Using advanced imaging technology, Ram and his team analyzed the crosses in intricate detail, right down to the chiseling techniques that were used to create them. Alongside the crosses, they noticed inscriptions containing names and dates, presumably indicating the approximate time periods during which the crosses nearby were inscribed. The study is admittedly inconclusive, with the carvings requiring further investigation to determine if they truly date back to the Crusades, and if medieval pilgrims kept the dust from the crosses. Hobby Lobby smuggling scandal. The evangelical Christian-owned Hobby Lobby craft store chain prides itself on its wholesome, family-friendly values. It's the perfect place to go if you want to get craft supplies. But they do a lot more than just help you with your hobbies. The company at least partially tarnished its virtuous reputation when it found itself entangled in a contentious tug-of-war with the federal government over some stolen artifacts it had imported for the Museum of the Bible, which is funded by the store's owners. In 2010, Hobby Lobby paid $1.6 million for an array of Iraqi artifacts from dealers based in the United Arab Emirates. The collection consisted largely of cuneiform tablets, clay bullae, and cylinder seals, most of which lacked provenance, which are records proving their history of ownership, leading authorities to suspect that the artifacts had possibly been looted and sold illegally. It's speculated that some items were taken from the National Museum of Iraq following the U.S. invasion of the country in 2003, and the customs declarations misrepresented some of the artifacts. After customs agents seized several shipments in 2011, Yale archaeologist Eckhard Fromm determined that several hundred 4,000-year-old clay tablets originated from the ancient Sumerian city of Irisagrig, where proper excavations have never been carried out. These were just some of several thousand artifacts that authorities ultimately determined were smuggled into the United States. A years-long legal battle ensued, and in 2017, Hobby Lobby agreed to forfeit the collection and pay a $3 million fine, and the objects were returned to Iraq. When artifacts are removed from archaeological sites, they not only become physically lost and therefore unavailable for public benefit, but this also causes experts to lose their ability to glean information from the items by examining them in their original context. Even if the objects are recovered, a lot of what they first stood to teach us is lost, and in this case, so are thousands of years of cultural heritage. Mystery structure. While excavating a historic train station on the Asian side of Istanbul's Kadıköy district, archaeologists found the ruins of a marble structure covering mass graves. Located on the border between Europe and Asia, the structure is believed to have been sacred, but they don't know what it was used for, and the surrounding architecture offers no clues either. Found at the station's waiting platforms, the shape of the large structure was undoubtedly used for religious purposes. Yet researchers are confident that it was not a church, because nothing quite like it has ever been seen before. They believe they will find more answers as they continue to dig and uncover more artifacts and structures. Plus, the mass grave is something to be considered, but archaeologists don't seem too concerned about that right now. Excavations here began in 2018 when the station was closed for renovations, and have yielded numerous fascinating finds from different civilizations that have lived there over the centuries, including a breakwater, 2 water reservoirs, and 18,000 coins dating as far back as the 7th century BC. A bustling trade center of the ancient world, the Kadıköy district was once home to a lavish Byzantine palace, but all it left behind were colorful mosaics and marble pieces. Archaeologists have also uncovered the remains of a 1,500-year-old church and a fountain dating back to the early Byzantine era. Golden Coffin. In 2017, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York paid almost $4 million for a golden-sheathed ancient Egyptian coffin dating back to the 1st century BC. Acquired from a Paris-based art dealer, inscriptions on the casket indicate that it belonged to the remains of a high-ranking priest from Heracleopolis. The following year, the museum put the gilded coffin on display. Less than a year after that, in 2019, investigators determined that the coffin was actually looted from Egypt, and the Met closed the exhibit and agreed to forfeit the artifact. As it turned out, the institution had been furnished with fraudulent provenance materials, making it look as if the coffin had been exported from Egypt long ago. But in reality, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office found compelling evidence that it was unlawfully taken from the country in 2011. Writing for the New York Times, Colin Moynihan pointed out that this is one of a shocking number of artifacts that the Met has either given up or had seized on suspicions that the item might have been stolen. In 2017, the DA's office seized a 2,300-year-old vase featuring the god of wine Dionysus that was plundered from Italy back in the 1970s. The following year, the museum returned an 8th century statue depicting a Hindu goddess and a 3rd century limestone sculpture to India. These and other instances of the museum having possibly looted artifacts in its possession have caused some to question the thoroughness of its vetting methods. The Met responded to such criticisms by asserting that it would learn from these blunders and revisit its acquisition policies. They have to do a lot more detective work because thieves and forgers are getting better and better at faking documents and the history of where artifacts come from, and they are getting paid millions. Unidentified stone head. Late last year, headlines detailed the discovery of a mysterious stone head at Shaftesbury Abbey in Dorset, England. Archaeologists were not only puzzled by the subject's identity, they were also unsure of the person's gender, owing to the combination of a seemingly masculine jawline and long flowing hair of a woman, according to The Guardian. The head's nose, jawline, and several other facial features were missing, possibly from damage inflicted by a sledgehammer, further obscuring the subject's identity. Because the individual is wearing a crown, researchers know the statue likely represents a royal figure. Based on its estimated age dating back to the 1340s, they surmise that the subject is King Edward II, who ruled from 1307 to 1327 after inheriting the crown as his father's only surviving son. Edward II's tumultuous reign was characterized by a Scottish defeat, being forced to surrender the crown to his 14-year-old son, and a suspected homosexual relationship, which was considered very taboo at the time. Upon being deposed, he was imprisoned and executed. The team that discovered the statue believes it may be part of a larger gallery of sculptures depicting royals that once stood at Shaftesbury. Founded in 888 by the Anglo-Saxon king Alfred the Great, the abbey was England's first religious house exclusively for women. It thrived for centuries before being closed in 1539 under the order of Henry VIII, and thereafter fell into ruins. Archaeologists have admitted that they may never definitively establish the stone head's identity, but they are still trying. St. Mark Mosaic. When Turkish forces invaded the island nation of Cyprus in 1974, Byzantine-era mosaics and religious artifacts were ripped from the walls of the Panagia Kanakaria Church. The government and church worked tirelessly to recover the items from the underground antiquities market. Most of the pieces were retrieved between 1983 and 2015, but some are still missing, according to Maria Paffiti, a former department head at Christie's auction house. One of the final missing pieces was recovered in 2018 by renowned Dutch art investigator Arthur Brand, following a 2-year chase across Europe. Dubbed the Indiana Jones of the art world for his uncanny ability to track down lost and stolen works, Brand traced a 6th century mosaic of St. Mark through intermediaries to an upscale home in Monaco, where it was in the possession of a British family who had bought it decades earlier. Horrified to learn that the mosaic was stolen, the family readily agreed to give it back to Cyprus. It was one of the greatest honors of Brand's career to return the artwork, which has an estimated value of $5.7 to $11 million, but is considered priceless as a heritage artifact. Giant mounds. A collection of at least 19 earthen mounds called tumuli, some measuring as high as a 6-story building, have stood in Israel for over 2,500 years. Located in the suburbs outside Jerusalem, they are a daily sight to many locals, but nobody knows who built them or why. In an effort to get to the bottom of the mystery and in anticipation of the construction of a new housing development, the Israel Antiquities Authority recently conducted a thorough excavation of one of the mounds. Inside, they found the ruins of a building dating back some 2,700 years and several dozen stamped jar handles that they believe trace back to the Kingdom of Judah during the First Temple period. The team theorized that the site was an administrative center, but they are unsure why the biblical-era structure was buried, or if there are similar things hidden beneath the other mounds. Because the mounds are situated within close proximity to one another, some archaeologists think that their creation stems from a unified purpose. IAA Chief Archaeologist for Jerusalem, Yuval Baruch, explained that the amount of work required to build the mounds suggests that they were more than just garbage heaps or stones and earth that were cleared from nearby agricultural fields. A 1953 dig found a retaining ring wall with a set of stairs leading to a platform within, which was filled with burnt animal bones and evidence of fire. Israeli archaeologist Ruth Amiran speculated that the contents date back to the 7th or 8th century BC, and that the structure was a worship site that had been outlawed. Experts are skeptical of this theory, but lend some credibility to the idea proposed in 2003 that memorial ceremonies to the biblical kings of Judah were performed at the sites. Noting that nearly all the archaeological discoveries near the mounds are related to agriculture and administration, modern researchers have largely distanced themselves from religious theories, with some connecting the mounds to a nearby administrative center and palace that once served as a center for tax collection. Gargantuan treasure trove. Earlier this year, the Israel Antiquities Authority announced that it had recovered thousands of museum-quality stolen artifacts, not only from ancient sites within the country, but also the Mediterranean, the Middle East, Africa, and South America. Working with the Israeli Police and Tax Authority, the agency carried out a coordinated set of raids at 3 sites in central Israel, including storage rooms and private homes. The cache includes hundreds of coins, jewelry, statues, and bronze, stone, and glass items from various periods. Many of the local artifacts, including coins, date back between 312 BC and 63 BC to the Seleucid Empire. Authorities also seized 5th and 6th century pottery from Italy and Greece and Egyptian sarcophagi. Everything in the collection comes from sometime between the 1st millennium BC to the 11th century AD. Oddly, much of the pottery was repaired, suggesting that an underground expert was commissioned to restore it. It's believed that the looters acquired many of the goods from ancient graves throughout the world. 3 suspects were arrested for dealing the stolen wares, but the original thieves have not yet been apprehended, and the investigation is ongoing. Nebra Sky Disc. While hunting for treasure near the German town of Nebra in 1999, a group of metal detectorists discovered a 13-inch blue-green disc featuring a crescent moon, a sun or a full moon, and 2 gold bands, one which may represent the horizon. The finders heavily damaged the artifact while excavating it and attempted to sell it illegally. Swiss authorities caught them in an undercover sting in 2003, and the disc was subsequently turned over to the government that has jurisdiction over the area where they found it. Due at least partially to its shady past, tracing the object's origins has been a challenge for researchers, who initially dated it to around 1600 BC, which would make it roughly 3,600 years old. If this is accurate, it means the Nebra sky disk is the world's oldest known depiction of the heavens. But some scholars have challenged this proposed date, while others believe the disk is an outright fake. A recent study claims that the artifact is as much as 1,000 years younger than it was originally estimated to be, and argues that it lacks the deep meaning that researchers have attached to it. Much to the outrage of German society, the piece also asserts that the disc was not discovered anywhere near Nebra. The archaeologist who conducted the study believes that the disc dates back to sometime between 2,800 and 2,050 years ago, during the Celtic Iron Age, and that confusion between law enforcement and the people who found it have made it pretty hard to figure out where it really came from and what it means. Etruscan vase. For over 30 years, the Metropolitan Museum of Art claimed ownership of one of the finest Etruscan vases in the world, while the Italian government fought for the return of the 2,500-year-old artifact and several other items it believed were stolen and smuggled into the United States. Known as the Euphronios crater, the vase was crafted around 515 BC by Euphronios, one of the greatest artists of ancient Greece. Fewer than 30 are known to survive. It came into the Met's possession in 1972 with no solid records of its provenance. The Italian government pressured the museum to provide proof of where it came from while conducting its own investigation and determining that the crater was likely looted near Cerveteri, a town located northwest of Rome in Italy's Grepe Sant'Angelo area. From there, the vase passed through the hands of a corrupt Italian antiquities dealer, then to the American dealer Robert Hecht, who sold it to the Met. In 2006, the museum made an offer to Italy. It would return the crater and 19 other items in exchange for being able to keep some of the artifacts on long-term loan. The parties eventually reached an agreement, and in 2008, the crater was returned to Italy. Mysterious portrait. For centuries, a portrait of an unknown woman has graced the halls of England's royal homes, leaving researchers so baffled they have resigned to the possibility that they may never figure out who she is. Known as Portrait of a Woman, the painting in question is currently located in Mary Queen of Scots' bedchamber at the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh, Scotland. Last year, experts announced that they had finally identified the subject as Mary Boleyn, the older sister of Henry VIII's ill-fated second wife, Anne Boleyn. The painting is part of a 14-piece collection of specially commissioned portraits called The Beauties, which were likely created during the 1630s by Flemish artist Remigius van Leeuwenhoek. Oddly, Mary's portrait features 16th century clothing, while the 13 other subjects donned 17th century attire. This confusion caused the unidentified portrait to be separated from the rest during the 19th century. The team identified the painting by analyzing the age of its wood panel using a process called dendrochronology. The material came from a Baltic oak that was cut down sometime between 1651 and 1671, matching another previously unidentified portrait in the collection. Lead researcher and historian Justin Davies told the Two Door Travel Show podcast that the woman is indeed likely to be Mary Boleyn, but that one can never be 100% sure in art history because we are unable to stand at the shoulder of the painter when he's doing it. Thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these, and I'll see you next time!